I had the speech memorized. Every word I was going to say to my brother, every accusation, every piece of evidence I had been collecting in my head for months. The bank statements showed 3 withdrawals of $2,000 each from our mother's savings account. The withdrawals were dated the same week she was in the hospital. And then there was the voicemail. I had listened to it 47 times. My brother's voice, low and quick, saying, "I need 2 more weeks. She does not need to know. Just keep her on the pain meds." I rehearsed my confrontation in the car on the way to work. I rehearsed it in the shower. I rehearsed it at night when I could not sleep, and my wife would roll over and ask what was wrong, and I would say nothing because I was not ready to tell her how angry I really was. 2 years of silence between us, and I was done waiting. I drove to his apartment on a Thursday night. I parked outside. I sat there with my hand on the door handle for 11 minutes. I watched the light in his window, and I thought about every fight we had ever had, every favor I had done for him that he never paid back, every lie he had told me that I pretended to believe. I almost walked up those stairs. My foot was on the pavement. The door was right there. But something made me wait 1 more week. I do not know what it was. Fear, maybe. Or instinct. Or just the smallest voice in the back of my head that said you do not have the whole story yet. That week changed everything. Because when I finally did confront him, he told me something that made me realize I had almost destroyed us both. And he was not the person I thought he was. Not even close. Mark borrowed $8,000 from me in June. He called it a business bridge loan, which was his way of making it sound professional, so I would not ask too many questions. He said he needed it for 30 days, maybe 60, definitely no more than 90. He promised to pay it back in 3 months. He said I was the only person he could ask, and he would never forget it, and this was going to be the thing that finally got him stable. I wrote him a check because he was my brother, and I had watched him struggle for years, and I wanted to believe this was the time it would be different. Month 4 came and went with no payment. I called him. He did not answer. I texted him. He said things were tight, but he would get me soon. Month 5, the same. Month 6, he stopped answering texts altogether. By month 8, I was not calling anymore because I could not stand the sound of his voicemail. That was the beginning of 2 years of silence. Not the kind of silence where 2 people drift apart naturally. The kind where one person disappears and the other person watches and wonders what he did wrong. I drove past Mark's apartment twice a week for 2 years. It was not on my way to work. I added 20 minutes to my route just to pass his building. I told myself I was checking to see if he still lived there. But I knew what I was doing. I was feeding my anger. I would slow down in front of his building and look for his truck. The new truck. He bought it 6 months after he stopped returning my calls. A black Ford with chrome wheels and a payment book I knew he could not afford. Then the watch. A stainless steel thing he showed off in a Facebook photo I was not supposed to see because he had blocked me, but my wife still had her account. Then the girlfriend. Someone new every few months, each one younger than the last, each one posing in front of the same black truck with the same chrome wheels. The $8,000 was gone. I knew that. I had accepted it by the end of year 1. But the money was never the point. The disrespect was. The way he looked me in the eye and promised, and then vanished. The way he bought things he could not afford while I was still driving the same car I had driven since before he borrowed the money. The way he cut me off completely, not even a text on my birthday, not even a lie I could pretend to believe. That was what I could not let go. 3 months before the hook, I started writing the confrontation speech. I wrote it in a notebook I kept in my glove compartment. I would sit in my car outside my own house and write down everything I wanted to say to him. I rehearsed it in the car on the way to work. I rehearsed it in the shower. I rehearsed it while driving to job sites, and my employees learned not to talk to me in the morning because I was not really there. I convinced myself that I did not need the money. I did not need an apology. I needed him to know that he had broken something that could not be fixed. I needed him to hear my voice and see my face and understand that his little brother was not the pushover he thought I was. I never asked myself why he disappeared. I never wondered what might have been happening in his life that made him cut off a brother who had always helped him. I just assumed he was selfish. I assumed he took the money and ran and never looked back, because that was the kind of person he had always been underneath the jokes and the promises and the "I love you, man" at the end of every phone call. I had 2 years to ask the right questions. I asked none of them. I just drove past his apartment twice a week and let the anger stack higher and told myself I was the victim of a brother who never deserved my trust in the first place. Rachel found the speech on a Tuesday morning. She was looking for a pen in the kitchen drawer, and there it was, my notebook open to the page where I had written the final version, the one I had been rehearsing for weeks. She stood there reading it while I drank my coffee and pretended not to notice. Then she closed the notebook and asked me quietly if I was sure I knew everything. She did not ask it like an accusation. She asked it like someone who had been watching me spiral for 2 years and was finally going to say something. I told her there was nothing else to know. Mark took $8,000 and disappeared. He stopped returning calls, stopped answering texts, stopped being my brother. The money was gone, and so was he, and that was the whole story. She asked if I tried to find out why. I said the why did not matter. She looked at me for a long second and then put the notebook back in the drawer and did not say anything else. But I saw her face. She did not believe me. For years ago, at our mother's funeral, Mark stood beside me the whole time. He did not cry once. I cried. Our sisters cried. Our father cried. But Mark just stood there with his shoulder pressed against mine, solid and silent, the way he had always been. When they lowered the casket, he grabbed my hand. Not a handshake, not a pat on the back. He held my hand the way you hold a child's hand when you're crossing a busy street. He held it so hard that I had bruises on my fingers the next day. I did not say anything. I did not pull away. I just let him hold on because I knew he was crying somewhere inside, even if nothing showed on his face. That was the last time I felt close to my brother. 2 months later, he borrowed the money. 4 months after that, he was gone. Rachel brought me a plate of eggs and sat across from me at the kitchen table. She said she saw Mark's girlfriend at the grocery store last week. The new one, the one with the dark hair and the thin arms. Rachel said the girl looked tired and scared. Not like someone enjoying new money. Not like someone who had just bought a watch or posed in front of a black truck. She looked, Rachel said, like someone who had been sleeping in a car. I told Rachel she was imagining things. I said Mark was fine. Mark always looked fine on the outside, even when everything inside was burning. That was his whole thing. That was who he had always been. Rachel nodded and finished her eggs and did not argue with me. But something shifted underneath. A question I did not want to ask. A thought I did not want to complete. Why would Mark's girlfriend look scared if the money came from something simple and clean? Why would she look tired if everything was fine? I pushed the question down and went to work and told myself Rachel was just being Rachel. She worried about everyone. That did not mean anything was wrong. I called Mark's phone on a Wednesday afternoon. 2 full years of silence, and I still had his number saved. I almost laughed at myself for that, for not deleting it, for carrying him around in my phone like he might call any day and explain everything. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of a Home Depot, and I pressed his name, and I listened to it ring. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. He picked up on the 4th ring. He did not say hello. He did not say my name. He just breathed into the phone for 6 seconds while I sat there with my mouth open because I had not expected him to answer at all. Then he said, "I know why you are calling." His voice was flat, not cold, just flat. The way people sound when they have been expecting something for a long time and it is finally happening and they have already rehearsed their part. I told him he owed me an explanation. I said it the way I had rehearsed it, the way I had said it in my car 100 times. He said, "I owe you more than that." He said, "But not yet." He asked me to give him 1 more week. I told him no. I told him I was done waiting. 2 years of silence. 2 years of driving past his apartment and watching him live a life that made no sense. 2 years of rehearsing speeches and writing in notebooks and lying to myself about how angry I really was. I was not waiting another week. I was not waiting another day. I told him I was coming over that night. That was when his voice cracked. I had never heard Mark's voice crack. Not when our mother died. Not when our father had his first heart attack. Not when he broke his collarbone playing football in high school and had to sit out the whole season. Mark did not crack. Mark was the steady one, the solid one, the one who held your hand so hard it left bruises because he could not cry, but he could squeeze. His voice cracked, and he said if I came there now, I would say things I cannot take back. He said he was not protecting me. He was protecting me. 1 week. That was all he was asking. I sat in my truck with the phone against my ear, and I did not say anything. I did not know what to say. Mark had never asked me for anything. Not really. He had borrowed money, but that was different. That was taking. This was asking. His voice was still cracked at the edges, and I could hear him breathing, and I realized I had no idea what was happening in his life. I had spent 2 years assuming the worst about him. I had never once considered that the worst might not be what I thought. He said 1 week, and then he said please. Mark never said please. Not to anyone. I told him fine. 1 week. I hung up the phone and sat in the Home Depot parking lot for another 20 minutes and tried to figure out what had just happened. He did not sound like someone who had stolen money and run. He sounded like someone who was drowning and did not want me to see him go under. I told Rachel about the call that night. I sat on the edge of our bed with my hands between my knees, and I told her everything. Mark answered. He asked for 1 more week. His voice cracked. He said, please. Rachel went pale while I was talking. Not a little pale. The kind of pale that happens when someone has been holding a secret and they know the moment has come to let it go. I asked her what was wrong. She sat down next to me and took my hand, and she told me she already knew something. She said Mark's girlfriend talked to her at the grocery store. Not just a quick hello in the produce aisle. A real conversation. The girl was crying. I asked what she said. Rachel looked at the floor. She said Mark has been sick. Not a cold. Not something that goes away with antibiotics. Something that required treatment for 18 months. Rachel did not know the name of it. She did not ask. But she said the girlfriend told her Mark had been going to appointments alone because he did not want anyone to know. He did not want to be the brother who needed help. He did not want to be the son who made everyone worry. He wanted to handle it himself and then come back like nothing had ever happened. But the treatment was not working the way he hoped. And the money he borrowed, the $8,000, that was not for a business loan. That was for a second opinion. A specialist in another state. Someone who might have had answers the local doctors did not. I did not say anything. I just sat there on the edge of the bed with Rachel's hand in mine, and I tried to remember every conversation I had with Mark before he stopped returning my calls. He had said he was tired a lot. He had said he was dealing with something, but he did not want to talk about it. I had assumed he meant debt. I had assumed he meant trouble with a woman, or trouble with his landlord, or trouble with the IRS. I had assumed the worst version of every possibility. I had not assumed sickness. I had not assumed fear. I drove to Mark's apartment that night. I did not tell Rachel where I was going. I just got in my truck and drove. But I did not park in front of his building. I parked around the corner where he could not see me. I sat in the dark with the engine off, and I watched his windows for 40 minutes. The light was on in his living room. The light was on in his bedroom. I could see shadows moving sometimes, but not clearly. Then Mark came outside. He walked slowly, too slowly. He walked like someone who had to think about every step. He made it to the railing at the bottom of the stairs, and he leaned on it like he needed it to stand. Like without that railing, he might not stay upright. He stood there for a minute, maybe 2. Then he went back inside. He looked 20 pounds lighter than the last time I saw him. 20 pounds at least. His shoulders were narrow under his jacket. His neck was thin. The new truck and the new watch were not rewards. They were not signs of a man who had stolen money and lived well. They were goodbye. A man buying things he always wanted because he did not know how much time he had left. The money was not stolen. It was taken for something Mark never wanted to explain. Something he was still hiding even now. $8,000 for a second opinion that probably did not give him the answer he needed. And I had spent 2 years calling him a thief in my head while he was losing weight and going to appointments alone and leaning on railings because he could not stand up by himself anymore. I went home in a daze. The drive from Mark's apartment took 20 minutes, but I did not remember any of it. I parked in my own driveway, and sat there for a while with the engine off, trying to put words to what I'd seen. My brother leaning on a railing because he could not stand on his own. My brother 20 pounds lighter and moving like an old man. My brother sick and alone and too proud to tell anyone. I walked into the kitchen and Rachel was sitting at the table with a woman I did not recognize at first. Then I did. It was Mark's girlfriend, the one from the grocery store, the one Rachel had talked to. Her name was Kara, and she had been crying. Her eyes were red and her nose was running, and she was holding a coffee mug with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her in the chair. She would not look at me. She stared at the mug, and she did not say anything when I walked in. Rachel stood up and said Kara came to talk to us. She said it quietly, the way you say things when you're trying to keep someone from falling apart. I sat down across from Kara. I waited. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, and she finally looked up at me. Her eyes were wet and tired, and she said Mark does not want you to know this. She said he has been very clear about that from the beginning. But you are about to confront him, and he cannot handle it right now. She said he finishes his last treatment in 6 days. That is why he asked for a week. I asked what treatment. I did not recognize my own voice. It sounded flat and distant like I was hearing it from somewhere else. Kara put the coffee mug down and folded her hands on the table. She said Mark has been in a clinical trial for 2 years, a condition that started damaging his liver. The doctors caught it late. They told him he needed aggressive treatment or he would not have much time. Mark borrowed the money for medications his insurance would not cover. The $8,000. That is what it was for. Not a business loan, not a bridge to anything. Just drugs that might keep him alive long enough for the trial to work. I sat there. I did not say anything. Kara kept talking because she could not stop. She said Mark did not want anyone to know because he did not want to be seen as broken. He had always been the strong one, the one who held everyone else up. He could not stand the idea of his little brother looking at him with pity instead of respect. So he pushed everyone away. He stopped returning calls. He stopped coming to family dinners. He bought things he could not afford because he did not think he would live long enough to pay for them anyway. The truck, the watch, all of it was a man saying goodbye to himself in the only way he knew how. 6 days. That was all Mark was asking for. 6 days until his last treatment. Then he was going to tell me everything. He had planned it. He had a speech of his own, but I was going to ruin it by showing up angry and accusing him of things he did not do. I was going to walk into his apartment and throw bank statements at his chest and call him a thief while his liver was failing and he was driving himself to appointments alone because he did not want to be a burden. I almost did that. I was one phone call away from doing that. And now I had to sit in my own kitchen across from a woman who had been crying for who knows how long and ask myself what damage I would cause if I confronted him now, before the treatment ended, before he was ready, before I knew the whole story. I did not have an answer. I just sat there and felt the weight of everything I almost did. I sat in my car at 2 in the morning. Rachel had gone to bed. Kara had gone home. The kitchen light was off and the house was quiet, and I was sitting in the driver's seat of my truck in my own driveway with the windows down because I could not breathe inside anymore. I kept seeing Mark on that railing, his thin shoulders, his slow steps, the way he leaned like the world was pushing down on him and he did not have the strength to push back. And I kept hearing my own voice in my head, the speech I had rehearsed 1,000 times, every word I was going to throw at him. You owe me. You stole from me. You lied to me. You disappeared. I had built 2 years of anger around the idea that Mark was lazy and selfish and dishonest. I had never once considered that he might be scared. My confrontation speech was not justice. It was an ambush, a planned attack on someone who was already down, already sick, already fighting something I could not see because I never bothered to look. I had convinced myself that I was the victim and Mark was the villain and the world was simple and clean and I was right. But I was not right. I was just angry. And anger had cost me 2 years of a brother I might not have much longer. I started the truck and drove back to Mark's apartment. I parked around the corner again. I got out and walked to his building and I saw his truck in the lot, the black Ford with the chrome wheels, sitting there in the dark like nothing was wrong. I pulled an envelope out of my pocket. I had grabbed it from my desk before I left the house. I wrote a note on the back of an old receipt. I said, "I am not coming up tonight. Call me when you are ready, not before." I folded the note and put it in the envelope and walked over to his truck. I tucked the envelope under the windshield wiper on the driver's side where he could not miss it. Then I walked back to my truck and drove home. The grill was still in the backyard from the summer. I opened the lid and I took the notebook out of my jacket pocket, the one with the speech, the one I had been writing in for 3 months. I tore the pages out one by one and I dropped them into the grill. Then I lit a match and I watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. Every word I had rehearsed, every accusation, every angry sentence I had planned to throw at my brother. Gone. I stood there in the dark with the smoke in my face, and I waited to feel something. Relief, freedom, peace. But I did not feel any of those things. I just felt tired, tired in a way that went down to my bones. Rachel was standing at the kitchen window. She did not come outside. She did not say anything. She just watched me burn my anger in the backyard grill while the neighbors slept and the night got colder and the smoke disappeared into the sky. I stood there until the last page was ash, and then I closed the grill and went inside. The anger was gone. For the first time in 2 years, I was not carrying it. I was not rehearsing speeches or driving past his apartment or adding 20 minutes to my commute just to feed the fire. I was just empty, and I did not know if empty was better or worse. I only knew that Mark had 6 days left of his treatment, and I was going to give him every single one of them. No calls. No visits, no confrontation. He asked for a week. He was going to get it, and I was going to find out if a week was enough to save what we had almost lost. I'm over it where silence ends. Have you ever been so sure you were right that you almost destroyed someone who was already dying just so you could prove a point? 6 days later, Mark called at 7 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I had not been sleeping well. Not because I was angry anymore, because I was scared. Scared that the week would pass and he would not call. Scared that he would call and tell me the treatment did not work. Scared that I had wasted 2 years being angry at a man who was fighting for his life while I sat in my truck and rehearsed speeches about disrespect. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Mark. I answered and he said he was done. He said I could come over now. I drove to his apartment without speeding. That surprised me. I thought I would race across town, run red lights, park illegally. But I drove the speed limit. I stopped at every stop sign. I sat at red lights and watched the seconds tick by, and I did not feel any urgency. The urgency was gone. The anger was gone. What was left was something quieter, something I did not have a name for. I walked into Mark's apartment, and the first thing I saw was the coffee table. It was covered in medical papers, lab results, prescription bottles, a calendar with every treatment date marked in red ink, folders from 2 different hospitals, a notebook that looked a lot like the one I had burned in my backyard grill. Mark was sitting on the couch with his hands folded in his lap. He looked better than he had 6 days ago. Not healthy, not the way I remembered him from before, but better, some color in his face. His shoulders not so narrow. He did not stand up when I walked in. He just looked at me and said he was going to let me hate him. He said it was easier than telling me he might not make it. I sat down across from him. I did not know what to do with my hands, so I put them on my knees. I told him he should have told me. The words came out flat, not angry, just tired. He shook his head and said if he had told me, I would have come. He said I would have dropped everything and driven to his apartment and sat with him through every treatment and held his hand the way he held mine at Mom's funeral. And if he died anyway, he said, I would have watched. He said he could not do that to me. He said he could not make me watch him die. I opened my mouth to argue, and then I closed it because he was right. I would have come. I would have been there every day. I would have held his hand and brought him food and sat in waiting rooms and made phone calls. And if he died, I would have watched. I would have been there at the end. And that would have broken me in a way that anger never could. He was not protecting himself when he pushed me away. He was protecting me. Mark reached down and picked up an envelope from the coffee table. He handed it to me. Inside was a check, $8,000, dated that morning. He said the trial worked. His numbers were stable. He was not dying. Not anymore. Not today. He said the doctors were cautious, but they were also hopeful, and that was more than he had 2 years ago. He watched me look at the check, and then he said the thing that broke me open. He said if I had come up those stairs 2 years ago, he would have let me destroy him. He said he did not have the fight in him yet. He was too tired and too scared and too ashamed. He said I would have won. I would have said every word of that speech I had written, and he would have sat there and taken it and agreed with all of it because he did not have the energy to defend himself. He said I would have walked out of his apartment feeling like I had won something, and I would have lost him forever. He would not have called after that. He would not have asked for a week. He would have just let me believe the worst about him, and he would have died alone, and I would have spent the rest of my life thinking my brother was a thief. I sat there on his couch with the check in my hands, and I did not say anything. There were no words for what I was feeling. Not gratitude, not relief, not shame, all of those things at once. And underneath them, something I had not felt in 2 years. Love, just love. For my brother who was sick and scared and too proud to ask for help. Who pushed me away so I would not have to watch him fall apart. Who almost let me hate him because that was easier than watching me hurt. I put the check on the table. I stood up. I walked over to the couch, and I sat down next to him, and I did not say anything. I just sat there. He did not say anything either. That was enough. We sat on his couch for a long time after that. The medical papers were still spread across the coffee table, but I stopped seeing them. What I saw was my brother. Alive. Stable. Not dying. I had spent 2 years preparing to confront a thief, and instead, I was sitting next to a man who had almost let me hate him so I would not have to watch him die. I asked him why he did not just tell me from the beginning. Not the details. Not the clinical trial or the insurance problems or the $8,000. Just the truth. I'm sick. I need help. I cannot do this alone. Mark stared at the wall for a minute before he answered. He said he was ashamed. Not of being sick. Not of needing money. Ashamed of what sickness would do to the people who loved him. He said we grew up watching our father get sick. Not physically at first. Emotionally. Our father turned on everyone when he was hurting. He lashed out. He pushed people away with anger instead of silence. By the time he finally got help, half the family would not speak to him anymore. Mark said he watched that happen, and he swore he would never be that person. He would never let his sickness turn him into someone who hurt the people he loved. So he had the only thing he could think of. He disappeared before he could do damage. I told him he cut me out to protect me from watching him die. He shook his head and corrected me. He said he cut himself out because he could not watch me watch him. He said the idea of me sitting in a hospital waiting room, crying, holding Rachel's hand, telling our family bad news over the phone. He said that image kept him up at night more than the fear of dying. He said he would rather be alone and have me hate him than be surrounded and have me watch him fall apart. I did not know what to say to that. It was the most selfish thing I had ever heard and the most selfless at the same time. He was wrong to do it, but I understood why he did it. I told Mark about the speech, the notebook, the 3 months of rehearsing, the 11 minutes I sat in my car with my hand on the door handle, ready to walk up his stairs and end our relationship forever. I told him about the bank statements I had printed out and the voicemail I had listened to 47 times. I told him about the anger I carried for 2 years and the way it felt to burn it all on the backyard grill while Rachel watched from the kitchen window. Mark listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he laughed. Not a sad laugh. Not a tired laugh. A real laugh. The first time I had heard him laugh in 2 years. He said I would have destroyed him. He said, good thing I waited. I sat there and watched my brother laugh, and I realized how close we had come to losing each other. Not because of the money. Not because of the sickness. Because neither one of us knew how to say the words that mattered. He could not say I am scared. I could not say I am worried about you. So he disappeared, and I got angry, and we both spent 2 years alone with versions of each other that were not real. The week I waited changed everything. But the week was not the hard part. The hard part was everything that came before it. The 2 years of silence. The assumptions. The speeches I wrote in my head. The damage we both did to ourselves while we were too proud to pick up the phone. 1 month later, we had dinner at Mark's apartment. Rachel cooked. She made the lasagna she used to make for holidays, the one Mark always asked for seconds of. Cara brought wine, 2 bottles, red and white, because she was not sure what everyone wanted. Mark set the table. He used real plates, not paper, and he folded the napkins into triangles the way our mother used to do. I sat in the chair across from him and watched him move around the kitchen. He was still thin, still not all the way back, but he was not leaning on anything. He was not holding the counter to stay upright. He was just cooking dinner with his girlfriend and his brother and his sister-in-law, and that was enough. Mark made a joke about the $8,000 being the most expensive loan in history. He said he should have just asked for the money up front instead of all the secrecy and the silence and the 2 years of me plotting his demise. Everyone laughed, but not all the way. There was something underneath the laughter, something none of us wanted to name. The memory of how close we came. The knowledge that this dinner almost never happened. The week I waited was the only reason we were all sitting there with real plates and triangle napkins and lasagna that Rachel had spent 3 hours making. I still drive past Mark's apartment sometimes. Not on purpose. Not the way I used to, adding 20 minutes to my route just to feed the anger. Just habit. I will be coming home from a job site, and my truck will turn the corner, and there his building will be. Sometimes the light is on. Sometimes it is dark. But every time I drive past, I feel the ghost of that night. My hand on the door handle. The 11 minutes I sat there with my foot on the pavement. The almost. The version of myself who almost walked up those stairs and ended everything before it had a chance to start. I feel that ghost, and then I park and I go upstairs. I do not call first anymore. I just knock, and Mark always answers. I have thought a lot about what the week bought me. Not time, not answers. Something else. The week I waited did not just save Mark. It saved the version of myself who would have said unforgivable things to a dying man. I would have walked into his apartment with my speech and my bank statements and my 47 listens to that voicemail, and I would have destroyed him. And I would have spent the rest of my life knowing that I screamed at my brother while his liver was failing and he was too tired to fight back. The week turned me from his accuser into the person who got to watch him live. That is a different thing entirely. Accusers stand outside the door with their hands on the handle. The people who get to watch live sit across the table and fold their napkins into triangles and laugh at jokes about $8,000. I almost confronted my brother 2 years too early. I was ready. I had the speech memorized. I had the evidence. I had 2 years of anger stored up like fuel for a fire I was desperate to light. But I waited 1 week, and that week changed everything, because it turned me from his accuser into the person who got to watch him live. I'm over at where silence ends. Have you ever almost destroyed someone you loved because you were too angry to ask if they were okay first?